What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Whiskey Morgue podcast, where we talk about the whiskey we're drinking, the horror we're watching, and anything else we really feel like. Today, I am joined by Master Blender of Westward Whiskey, Miles Munroe. Miles, thank you for making this happen in such a tight time, but I'm glad we're finally sitting down here and ready to share a drink together, or three.
Yeah, at least a couple. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm so glad we could finally make this happen. I feel like we've both been like kind of following each other for a while now, and just kind of little like bits here and there, like yes, man, absolutely. And yeah, I know, and we've both been traveling so much, so it's cool we could actually get this. I just got back last night, so no, I'm glad we could do this. I'm so stoked to be here.
Yeah, and we'll talk about kind of like your travels and because I came up with this what I would like to think a genius analogy of where you're at in your travels. But I do think there was this game, like I was talking to my wife today and I said, I'm super excited for this one. And she's like, well, you're always excited. I'm like, but this one's a little bit more special. I'm like, because even before getting into Westward, before the sample was sent to me and I was intrigued by the whiskey alone, again, following our each other's accounts and kind of seeing the horror stuff that you post. And I was like, damn, like this is everything that I want, right? Like you think like you're in your own little corner of the internet, and all of a sudden, like here's this master blender out here doing great work with whiskey, but it's also posted the best horror memes and all this great content. And then there was
Yeah, I mean,
one. Sorry, go on.
yeah, it's same for me. I love both of these things. I love whiskey and horror separately. Obviously together whenever I can. But so yeah, to have like found you and like what you do was like these are two of my favorite things put together. Like I didn't know there were more of us out there. This is great.
I've realized that my calling, it's not that what I do in my day-to-day profession, but it's this is to bring all the whiskey and horror lovers together, and
Yeah.
it's been a cool project. But there's one other thing. So I love music too, right? So just kind of like in us connecting, so we finally message each other and we're kind of getting the ball rolling. And then I see One Arm Scissor, and I'm a huge At the Drive-In fan, like Mars Volta fan. So I saw
Amazing.
that and I was like, oh man, he just keeps getting cooler.
Yeah, I used to play in bands a long time ago. And yeah, just like huge into music. That's sort of that was my DJ name. I can't tell you the last time I actually like went somewhere and played records.
Oh, that's cool.
But
I just thought you liked the song, but that was your DJ name.
incredible song. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's
All
cool
right.
as hell. Yeah, big fan.
So
Definitely.
I thought I had heard bits about the music, and I feel like a lot of times I have my biggest flaw is skipping this stuff, but I do think it's fair to those who may be listening who don't know you, and maybe just getting like the quick version. And I don't know if there ever is a quick version of kind of like some of your eclectic experiences, because I know you got some, and then how did you end up at Westward?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Look, that's all good. Yeah, I mean, yeah, as you said, I'm the master blender for Westward Whiskey. I've been with the company almost 12 years. Westward's actually just celebrated our 20th anniversary back in August, so definitely one of the OG craft distilleries,
Wow.
going way back. Yeah, I mean, not that far back, but yeah, I was, as I mentioned, I was a musician for a long time, playing in bands, guitar, singing, and of course, if you're a musician, you're also broke, right? Unless you're famous, then you have money. So that I had my older sister had gone to culinary school, and she thankfully like guided me into the world of hospitality. So,
Nice.
so I started working at fine dining restaurants, which got me into wine, spirits, beer. I was always in the kitchen, just like asking questions about flavor and how they're putting things together, and it just became an obsession to where eventually I was managing a whiskey bar, still playing in bands.
Mm.
But that kind of lifestyle is very conducive to, touring and the nightlife, and like it all clicked. But eventually, yeah, I went from, going to tastings to hosting whiskey tastings, reading every book I could find on it. At the same time, playing in a band with the drummer was the buyer for this chain of bottle shops. This was in Kansas City, Missouri. And this was, I mean, 20 years ago. So, yeah, this is like the height of like second wave craft brewing. So he's bringing all this amazing beer to practice. I'm bringing all this incredible whiskey to practice. And it just dawned on me, craft beer can become excellent single malt whiskey, right?
Mm.
And that just kind of set me down this path. So I went to brewing school. I went to the American Brewers Guild, studied brewing there, and
Wow.
was a professional brewer for about 5 years or so. But yeah, all the while knowing that I specifically wanted to make single malt, not just whiskey in general, but that's where I wanted to go with it. And so, I moved to Portland to become a brewer. I was doing that here, and then eventually, started hearing about this distillery that's, an ex-brewer making whiskey, quietly making this like amazing single malt. So yeah, tracked him down, kicked in the door and made him hire me.
That's awesome. It's funny because I mean, I don't know. I'm gonna guess we're roughly in and around the same age, but I feel like very similar story. Like I played in bands as well. I just like my claim to fame is just playing the same stages in Toronto as some of the big acts, but I definitely wasn't touring. I didn't get there, but I can at least, if I wanted to throw in the Wikipedia, like same opera house that Nirvana and Metallica played, like that, I
Yes.
could just throw that under the resume. I just throw my name really tiny in the bottom, but there was that definitely that beer culture too. Like I started off in craft beer. I sometimes wish I ended there in terms of like what I do for online content because A, it's a lot cheaper, and B, the
Yeah.
artwork is insane, like in terms of like cans now that they put out. So it's funny, kind of like the same origin story and kind of getting our feet wet in the industry.
Yeah, that's super cool, man. The parallels just continue.
Yeah.
I love it.
Um, so I this made me think like this full circle kind of like moment where, and I told you I had this like analogy where we were talking when we were trying to hook this up, and you were in Australia for a while, and you were promoting. I know Westward does really well in Australia, and then after you're like, okay, well then I'm like in France, and I was like, oh, really cool, Miles. And then you're like, I'm then like when I get back, we have the milestone release in New York, and it kind of dawned on me because like I feel like when I think of some of my favorite bands that I listen to, like especially the indie bands, I feel like they had to go overseas first to like gain the reputation over there. And then it was like they would be accepted by their home, which was really bizarre. Like there's a few bands where I went to the UK, others, even I mentioned like at the drive-in and whatnot, and they had a bunch of stints doing like Europe. And then it was finally they make it big in the US. And it made me think of like this like um category of American single malt and kind of like the torch that I guess in many ways. I know there's a few of you that you're bearing, but this idea of like you went over there, you're promoting it, things I'm like, of all places, I was like shocked that, Australia is a huge market. But now we're seeing this ripple effect where I feel like, you're coming back to this launch party in New York and we see momentum picking up and I see it online. I follow all of my whiskey friends and whatnot. And, actually before doing this, I had a few of them DM me and they're like, especially with the milestone there, the edition two, they're like, dude, this is some of the best stuff I've had. And that's really cool to see is kind of like you've come home, like you've returned home, you've been pushing it, you've even looked at the outside markets, and here you are, like the band's making it.
Yeah, no, dude, that's a great analogy. I love that. Because yeah, as I said, we've been at it, not just me, but for 20 years, right? And it seems like, yeah, a lot of people are like, oh, this emerging category, American single malt. We're like, yeah, I guess. Like it's been a while for us, but hell yeah, let's go. So no, that's a cool analogy. And I mean that it is really how some of this worked for us. We launch an American single malt, and it right away we're just confusing to people here, you know,
Mhm.
in our home market, right? Like, so you're not a bourbon. No, we're single malt. Oh, I don't like smoky whiskey. Yeah, it's not peated. They're just like, what do you mean? Like, well, so what is it?
Well,
Whereas,
and it's crazy because he said 20 years and still, I know there's the ongoing issue with like the TTB even acknowledging it as its own category and defining what that
yeah,
means, right?
yeah.
Uh,
Well, yeah, we'll see.
so I like with this misconception of what like Westward is. I kind of did a little bit of my own homework, and I can see why. Again, like you said, someone who doesn't know or maybe is a little bit like ignorant to what like single malt is, they're like, yeah, I don't want that peated, smoky stuff. That's resemblant of Scotch. And then what was cool is I started digging into like what is Westward, what do you guys do, and I like in my notes I wrote this like trifecta of or like a hybrid of approaches that you guys take where I feel like
Yeah,
there's like a bit of scotch in terms of like how you distill, like you use new American oak, charred new oak. And then the other one was the beer. So coming back full circle, and you mentioned
yes.
like that you went to beer school, right? So I was it like a lot of barley that's used in Westward. So I'm like this is really cool how you've kind of like brought these all together, but also I can see how it's now the challenge to like pitch that and make people understand that you're not drinking scotch.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it took us a little while to kind of even figure out like how do we translate this to folks, right? Like how do we make this a little more digestible? Which, kind of going back to the whole export market thing is, we of course here in the States, each separate state is pretty much like opening up another country, right? Just the different rules and
Yeah.
regulations and the hoops you have to jump through. And so, as we saw, we resonated here and there around the US, but yeah, we saw an opportunity in Australia. That was our first export market. We saw like the burgeoning craft distilling scene that's going on there, just the appreciation they have for malt whiskey. And that was the first time I did any kind of presentation to like media journalists in our industry about Westward outside of the US, right? So I'm ready to just, explain away and try to answer as many questions as I can. And within a couple of minutes, they're like, oh, so you make single malt. It's just in the US. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what we do. I mean, there's a lot more to it, but like conceptually, like, yeah, you
Yeah.
got it. That's it. And so I think that is why we resonate. I mean, I say this all the time, but like, if you say whiskey, just the word whiskey in the US, people are going to assume you mean bourbon. But you
Mhm.
you say whiskey pretty much anywhere else in the world, people think you're talking about malt whiskey, right? Like
Yeah.
most places outside of North America, they're just like, yeah, oh, malt whiskey, like blended or single. Like, sure, it's made everywhere. India, Taiwan, Japan, Australia, of course, Ireland and Scotland, right? But so
Yeah.
many other places. It's the world whiskey. So,
Yeah, I think we sometimes forget that, and I know like when you and I have chatted before we jumped on here, I even mentioned myself kind of, um, you know, starting this account and drinking a lot of like single malt and drinking different Scotch, Irish whiskey, and even myself kind of finding that you start falling down the like the bourbon hole, and I feel like I
easily
almost
done.
yeah, and it was a few weeks ago I went to a Diageo tasting I got invited to. And I was like, oh, this is fun. Like I haven't done this in a while. So it was nice to just drink something other than bourbon and rye, which is primarily what I've been doing. And I obviously I love that, but just reminding me like the world's whiskey is traditionally like mostly like single malt whiskey. And here we are with some great distillers doing it well, I say in our own country because I'm just gonna like piggyback Canada onto the US,
Hell
but
yes.
which later on we'll talk about getting you guys up into Canada, so I don't have to go to the go to the
And
US to get you.
make these border runs. Yeah,
Yeah, make
right.
all these border runs.
I'll tell you what. No, that's cool, man. And I actually, when we were when we were talking about, pairing some of these Westwards with some movies, I even just like, I'm going to start with my first pairing, and it's not even with any of my whiskeys. It's just with American Single Malt. Like
Okay, cool.
I have a pairing for ASM, and
All
that's the
right.
autopsy of Jane Doe, because that movie is criminally underrated, just like American Single Malt. I feel like American Single Malt's been a slow burn. That movie is the slowest of slow burns. It's so good when it delivers. It really delivers. Yeah, man. That to me, like I
That
thought of that when
that
I was
that's
putting.
cool. I love that. Like in my mind, I was like, okay, we'll get into the tasting and we'll do pairings. And like you just started off with a big pairing. And I can't wait for my wife to hear this episode because we have this ongoing joke. I love Autopsy of Jane Doe, right? So um I'll put it on some nights. Like when we were like, what do you want to watch? And I'm like, I don't know, I'm gonna just watch something that's comforting, right? And she's into horror too. She's like, you're putting on Autopsy again, right? And I'm like, oh, it's been a while. She's like, oh, you mean a while, as in like a month that you've watched it? But that is the perfect parallel for that. Minus the fact that they find Pete under her fingernails in the
Ooh,
autopsy.
they
So
do.
we don't want to confuse anyone. There's no Pete.
Well, look,
Well,
okay, so I mean, there are a few American single malt makers that use peat, so
actually, you know what? I forgot that we're not talking just Westward here. We're talking the whole category because
for sure.
McCarthy's is one of my favorite in terms
Yeah,
of
I mean
peat.
the original. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I feel like we've been talking. We're not drinking enough. So I poured an ounce or so. Eyeballed it of each one. I'll let you kind of tell me which one you want to start with. I figured we taste it. I'll kind of give you my thoughts because it's my first time tasting these, and then we can chat away and maybe pair them up.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I'd say starting with our classic, that like our flagship single malt,
Cool. So
um,
yeah, we have this one here, right?
which would be that turquoise label,
Yeah.
right?
All
Yep.
right, I got
Yeah.
that one poured out here. Nice.
Yeah, because to me, that embodies Westward completely. That tells our whole story. Everything else is kind of just branching off from that. So yeah, that's a great place to start. But
Awesome.
indeed, let's have a
All
drink.
right, first one. Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, that's nice. So
So
let's
yeah,
say the craft brewing jumps out at me in this one, and kind of like again being into craft beer before with like a lot of like the tropical fruit notes. It's kind of hitting my nostrils here. There's a little bit more fun things going off on the palate, but like I definitely get like this like citrus fruit, papaya. This is really, really good.
yeah, that's the and you hit the nail on the head there. Yeah, we say, it's brewed like a pale ale, it's distilled as a single malt, and it's aged as a bourbon, like you mentioned before, just this kind of hybrid of styles. And that's it, man. We're using 100% high quality brewers two row pale malt to make the
Yeah,
whiskey. But we also use an ale yeast. We use the Sierra Nevada Pale Ale yeast strain. So all
very
that
cool.
tropical fruit, citrus, honeyed notes that you're getting, that's we're making an unhopped pale ale. That's what we
You know
do.
what? I sometimes make fun of notes. But I mean, I don't make fun of them, but I know it's like very subjective. But it's
Of
moments like
course.
this where I'm like, I might be doing something right in terms of what I'm getting, and then those connections there. Because yeah, I think like yeah, one of my stepping stones was Sierra Nevada Pale Ale before I kind of went off into all the crazy double IPA funky stuff going off in all these different craft brews. But um,
As we do.
they're definitely
Yeah, of
prevalent here
course.
on the nose and on the profile for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a big part of why we chose that strain as, ex-brewers coming from the craft world. We're like, okay, yes, we're making a single malt, but it's also it is an American whiskey. And so what are some iconic things we can point to or flavors that at least people may be familiar with, right? And so
Mhm.
being ex-brewers coming from craft beer, I mean, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, that's the one that put U.S. craft beer on the map for the world.
Yeah.
That's the OG. So, and we love that strain. It's an amazing yeast. It's super strong. It makes great flavor. If you treat it right, churns out alcohol like a just absolute champ. So, yeah, that's a big part of why we chose that. Was these are some flavors that people would be very familiar with when it comes to craft in the States.
Very cool. And one thing that stands out to me is I noticed that nothing's age stated here. And I don't even think the milestone that was put out was age stated. I don't know if like in the publication you put out like a range or whatever. But that being said, and if you put this up against again, if we want to compare it to like drinking some scotch or whatever, there's nothing that when people taste like a young bourbon, they're like, oh, it's grainy. I taste like the youth in it. And here, I just feel like it's full body, it's robust, it's complex. Like so, in terms of like, are you really just? Is it the combination of like the distillation in the new oak that you don't really have to worry about getting up in double digit age ranges to put out such an excellent product?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we have no interest in age statements. That's not to say we won't ever release one because never say never, but
Yeah.
it just isn't part of our story. It's not part of our approach. For me as the master blender, the whiskey's ready when it's ready. It's maturity, not age, right? It's what's
Hmm.
going on in the cask, not an arbitrary number for me. So yeah, we don't generally do that. And that's a few things. So, in talking about the fermentation, it's a long one. It's almost a week, at a very cool temperature. So the wash that we send to the stills, it's really delicious. We actually have people try it when they come to the distillery, which is, not something you're typically going to find
Yeah.
at a whiskey distillery. And so, yeah, when our distillation method is, trying to create this big, sort of robust, oily spirit, kind of that Campbelltown style. But really, we're just trying to concentrate all that good wash flavor that we just made over that week-long fermentation. So when we're done with distillation, I mean, we like us distillers, we call it barley eau de vie. The new make is so
Yeah.
good. It's got tons of flavor. It's just grain
You
and
got to bottle
fruit
some
and
of that up and,
citrus.
and send it my way.
I definitely will. We do bottle it. We don't sell it,
Okay.
but we bottle it for tasting. So
Okay.
yeah, man, absolutely. It's fantastic. So the idea is, every step of the way, we're just continuing to add good flavor, create more good flavor rather than rush through fermentation, try to figure out how we're going to fix that later. Yeah, I mean, going into new oak is it's a double-edged sword. It's good in that, yeah, you're going to get a lot of character from that, virgin oak, that charred American oak, but we're also putting single malt new make into new oak. And so there's a risk of over oaking, right?
Yeah.
That can just really jump on top of it. So we're looking for a balance there. So yeah, I think it's a combination of a few things. Also our climate, right? We're not cold and wet like Scotland. We're also
Mhm.
not hot and extreme with temperatures like Texas or Kentucky or something like that. We're in
Yeah.
between. We're just at about the 45th parallel, and we're in the bottom of a valley. So
Mhm.
we've got this like protected sort of temperate weather system here. Like we've got wet winters, obviously in the Northwest here. It
Yeah.
rains a lot, but it's cool. It's never cold. Our summers are hot and dry, they're quick. So we just don't have those extremes. And so yeah, it's I think really beneficial to the style of whiskey that we're making.
Yeah, I feel like, for a while, especially with like craft stuff, there was this idea of like how like, it's getting crazy in terms of temperature. We're like rapid aging everything. And I like the idea of just kind of like maybe a little bit more temporal and kind of it's doing its thing in the barrel. Especially with in terms of what you're building. And obviously you're building you're engineering something based on what you're working with, right? You're like, okay, we're due a single malt, it's going to new oak. You know what climate you're dealing with. So obviously everything's very intentional. And I think where this kind of flips it on its head, and I like it, is that I'm tasting this. This is oily. This is in my mouth, like, and I'm like, this is a flagship. Like, again, I feel like if you threw this in a blind tasting with some other really great single malts, it would definitely stand out. And I don't think many would probably even guess the age on it. And what's cool is that Westward, you've been doing it for 20 years. So I'm sure if you wanted to put out something with an age statement, and I know the industry right now loves it. They're like, craft has been around longer now. We see a bunch of like the
Yeah.
craft distilleries that they could slap an 8 year, 10 year plus age statement on it. And I feel like in many cases you don't really need to do that. Again, maybe you will, but this is a phenomenal product, and I don't even know how old it is.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a blend of whiskeys aged anywhere from 5 to 7 years, right?
Amazing.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Thanks for saying that. And we do. We want it to be distinctive. And we've often said that, the whole point of making a single malt up here is that we want to make a whiskey that speaks of its origins, that really has a sense of place. We're big believers in terroir and whiskey. I think it just depends on how you treat it, what you're
Yeah.
doing with it. And so that's a big part of why we don't make bourbon, right? Like where we are is where all the high quality barley is grown in the US. And I mean around Canada as well,
Yeah.
out this way. And so it makes sense for us to use this incredible barley that's just right here, right in our own backyard. And so yeah, I think again you nail it. Just a whiskey that can bring you somewhere, that can speak of its origins.
Yeah, and and it's definitely one where it makes me think of like I did a blind tasting not too long ago, and I forget what was in the mix, but there was a bunch of like higher end whiskeys, and when we got to the end, it was the non-age stated bottle that was like blended to whatever the blender was aiming for, that stood out. So, it's humbling because I think a lot of us think, age statements, and it has to kind of fit all this criteria. And I
Yeah.
think like what it's nice is we are kind of shifting towards, I believe, where there's a respect in blending as well. And you said you were even just with the Pursuit guys, and I think on the bourbon and rye end, they're doing a great job in kind of like, from different states bringing those together. So I do think
Yeah.
this is kind of like maybe like the blending renaissance. It was taboo for a while, and now we're seeing that it's like a piece of art. Like what you're putting together is very intentional.
Absolutely. I mean, we're talking about it's a craft, right? And so that to me, a craft is where science and art meet, right?
Mhm.
There's a technical side of things, there's a practical side of things, but then there's this sort of creative, yeah, subjective aspect to it that is just up to the person, right? Or to the people.
Yeah,
No, that's really cool. And yeah, I mean, look, age statements can be an indicator of quality. They're just not the only one,
for
right?
sure. I
There's
think it's a
many.
great way of just simplifying it.
Yeah.
So we said we'd pair each one of these, and
Yes.
now I'm thinking about it because like I have ideas in mind, and then we start drinking it, and I'm like, okay, we'll see where we're going. So, yeah, like, did you want to go first with kind of what comes to mind? I guess like this is your baby, right? So maybe you start off in terms of like, here's your flagship whiskey. What does it make you think of? What are your connections and the pairing that you have for it?
Totally. Like I said before, I mean, this embodies everything that is Westward in that bottle, right?
Yeah,
Which is a lot of things. So to me, this like classic, that's to me, that's American Werewolf in London. Like I love that movie. And where the parallels go for me is um, there's that movie isn't just a horror movie. It's also not just a comedy, right? It's also
Mhm.
not just a buddy movie. It's all of those things, and it's all of those things together, and it makes this incredibly awesome movie and like really enjoyable experience. And to me, like that's classic. It's not just one kind of style of whiskey, right? We're taking inspiration from bourbon. We're taking inspiration from single malt, taking inspiration from beer, right? And so it's taking all those things together. And I mean, I think, defying expectations has more of a universal appeal to it, right? Because I've tasted hardcore bourbon or nothing drinkers on this, and they love it, right? Because
Yeah.
it has that iconic kind of classic vanilla, baking spice, coconut aspect from the new oak.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
That's awesome. I like we almost went similar paths. I love that you kind of said it's like a blend of genres. And but then rooted in something that really is just so classic. And I kind of had the same approach, but like without maybe something as classic. So I know this is like your flagship whiskey, and I feel like, home or like the house is what like I think about, right? Right. In terms of like Westward, if you go to Westward's home, this is the West whiskey. Everything else stems from this. So I
yeah,
thought of like the American Horror Story series, and I'm like, this is Murder House. So this
very
is
cool.
like your foundation. This is like the first season, but after we're gonna have the same characters doing different things. There's different treatments, different finishes, and from there we get the extensions of what Westward is. But everything comes from that same cast from Murder House.
Love that. That's great. Absolutely. Yeah, man. It all kind of starts there, right?
I
And then
might,
you
I might, I
see
might just let you co-write. Like if I need to, you're probably busy as it is. I'm like, hey Miles, you want to do some pairings?
hell yes. What's funny is the other thing I thought about with we're very transparent at Westward. Like we have no secrets. Ask away, take all the pictures at the distillery. Like
Yeah,
we're really trying to show it off in a way because we're proud of it. And so that also just the like incredible like practical effects that Rick Baker did in American War with London. There's with that whole like transition scene, right? It doesn't do the
yeah,
classic cutaway. Like you see it all. And
yeah.
to me, that's us. We're just like you're with us every step of the way. We're totally transparent. We want you to see everything.
I love that the practical effects, and it was he was the first to win, I think, an Oscar, like in the horror genre for
Yeah,
like that.
right. Yeah,
That's so cool.
first. Yeah,
Yeah, I think I
amazing.
I love that because I feel like there is a lot of mystifying sometimes with and it's funny it plays to me because I hate CGI, and I think you and I would be the same
Okay.
because growing up and watching a lot of amazing practical effects, um, it's really hard to watch CGI stuff. I've been so invested in movies, and then all of a sudden you see some CGI creature, and I'm like, nope. I
Oh
was I
yeah.
was so into this until this thing came on screen.
Yeah. How could you? Ah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
you
going
do
in
feel a
such a
little bit
good direction.
betrayed, but not at Westward. No, we're gonna share. We're gonna share everything.
For better or worse, yes.
That's
Oh,
cool.
that's
All right,
awesome.
let's go on to our second one. Do you suggest going like the Pinot or the Stout?
Yeah, I'd say Pinot next. Yeah,
Okay,
Stout's a little punchier, so we can
sweet.
well in a different way. But
Yeah.
yeah, let's jump into
All
Pinot. And
right.
a quick little rundown on Pinot. So yeah, it's the Westward Pinot Noir cask. We're in Portland. Obviously, we've said that,
Yeah.
which is the Willamette Valley. And our south of Portland is the Willamette Valley AVA. It's incredibly wonderful wine region, making world-class Pinot Noirs amongst other wonderful wines. But that's what they're famous for. And yeah, this is again more of just taking people here to where we are and what we're doing, and using what's at hand and collaborating with other makers that are right here next to us.
Well,
That
I,
Pinot
I was
Cab.
gonna ask about that because I feel like kind of getting a little bit of like the curtain pulled back in the inside of the industry. I know there's a lot of like brokerages that get barrels sent over from Europe and whatnot, and you're hoping you get a good one and you don't know what's going on. I think like it's really cool that you're working with the vineyard that's an hour away and you know what barrels you're getting and you're getting
Yeah.
them probably quite fresh too. So I feel like even that alone is a little bit of an advantage in terms of like what you're playing with.
Again, nailed it. Yeah, absolutely. I have a sort of inherent distrust of barrel brokers, and that's not, I'm not throwing any shade here. It's
Yeah.
just the nature of the business. Generally, yeah, they've either signed some kind of non-disclosure or they just don't know. So you have no
Hmm.
idea how long the barrel's been empty, where the producer, where, who it was, the
Yeah.
quality of the wine or spirit or whatever was in it beforehand. You just really don't know most of the time. Sometimes you can dig in and figure it out, but yeah, exactly. Whereas,
Got to find all the little cues on the barrel. I've learned that that'll give it
yeah,
away.
yeah, right. Exactly. Read the hieroglyphics on the barrelhead and see if you can decipher what's going on.
Or unleash a
For
demon.
sure.
Who knows? One of the two.
Just don't say it out loud, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I
I'm
mean,
nosing this thing, and it's like so. Again, I just had the flagship, and that's you said that's the foundation for everything here.
yeah,
Um, and I feel like there's some familiarity there, but I am getting, a few different notes on that in terms of like more of the grape, obviously, a little bit of berries. But yeah, just like more like lush, like orchard fruit, I guess, is what's kind of coming to the front on the nose.
absolutely. Yeah. And so we get these really fresh. I mean, these are winemakers that we know personally. I'm in some of their wine clubs. Like we know the quality of the wine. We know the passion of the producer. And so, yeah, I mean, these are wet fill barrels. We're getting them right away. They're not rinsed or steamed or anything. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously picking up some good color and some great wine notes, but yeah, that kind of like orchard fruits that you're talking about. And even there's a bit of a kind of green note to it, like grassy, sort of
Yeah.
herbaceous that um I mean, that's, to me, the winemakers that we choose to work with, well, everyone in the Willamette Valley is doing biodynamic. But so many of these Pinot Noirs are really just earthy and just big, kind of jammy wines
Yeah, I
that can
love it, and I
lend a
feel
lot of
like
that.
when there's a nice balance there, it's one of my favorite things. And also, I'm biased because I grew up Portuguese and Italian immigrants, like as like parents. So there's a lot of homemade wine making, and
Yes,
maybe not the finest Pinot Noir, but I do appreciate really good wine. So again, like kind of like all these like the marrying of things that you enjoy. I'm gonna take a sip. I don't know if you have this one poured as well, but I'm definitely gonna take a sip here. Okay, you're ready. Wow. It's to me, it's cool that that's the same whiskey that I just drank in the other glass. But just kind of like the influence from the wine. And you get a little bit of like I don't even know if I'm going to describe it right, but I feel like if it was like wine tannins from like a wine barrel, there's a little bit of that adds like depth. I feel like it is a little bit darker, and there's still some of those like brighter fruit notes from the flagship. But again, the marrying of the two is just spot on. It's really nice.
thanks, man. This isn't a typical finish on this either. Really, I'd say it's more of a secondary maturation. We're going anywhere from 12 months to just about 2 years in these Pinot casks. The idea is I'm not trying to flavor Westward with Pinot Noir. Yeah, I
Yeah.
want them to integrate, right? To find similarities. And so, as you're saying with your tasting notes, it's lifting up. It's kind of elevating some of the elements that you already get in the classic and just turning
Mhm.
that volume up on, yeah, some of the fruits, some of the richness, some of that sort of tannic structure. Like it's just raising the volume on that.
So a question about that then, I guess, like I from the outside and not knowing too much, I always thought that there's been some wine finishes, like for instance, like in bourbon, where I was like, this is too much. Like I feel like it's overtly the wine. And I would have guessed that you're aging that for 1 year. Like if without knowing anything, I would have been like, was that left in the Pinot cask for 1 year? And you're telling me this is like a second maturation. It's about a year or more sometimes. And it's a complete opposite of what I would expect. Is it because like with more time and that and treating it more like a maturation that you're getting them to marry together?
It's a few things. And, one is, again, we're distilling Westward to be this really big, robust, vibrant whiskey. It's heavy on the palate. I mean, it's not overbearing, right? It's still
Mhm.
balanced, but it's a big whiskey. And so it stands up to secondary casks um, in a way that yeah, it's just not really we're not worried about it getting overpowered by most things. It's really taking the wheel. It's taking control
Yeah.
most of the time. It really is. It's doing the driving. But so yeah, with more time, the other thing is generally our barrel entry proof is about 62%.
Okay.
Um, and when we're taking whiskey out of those, American oak casks and putting them into these Pinot casks, we proof down. And
Yeah.
that does a couple things also. I think it extracts the sweeter elements of the wood because we're going into French oak now too, right? Like
Oh, okay.
winemakers here, they use French oak barriques, and French oak is a different species. It has different character to it. Um, so again, being careful not to over oak, we'll drop that entry proof from the American oak into the French oak, and it extracts the sweeter elements of the barrel. What it also does is extracts the I'd say the softer elements of the wine. Because a lot of winemakers in between fills, they'll sulfur their barrels, right? And as a whiskey maker, that's horrifying. Like that,
Yeah.
you don't get rid of that. That gets in there and it never goes away. So
Yeah.
um, even if they're not sulfuring once they empty and give them to me, I know that these barrels in the past have probably been sulfured, right? We're talking about
Yeah.
3 or 4, maybe 5 fills on these casks before they're
Okay.
going to sell them to me. So that lower entry proof also, yeah, my experience and what we're getting with the Pinot cask will extract very little of those sulfur compounds and just the softer side of that, the wine elements as well. So we don't have that kind of overbearing wine character where that's really just all you taste.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Well, even just the proofing, I feel like there's oftentimes, we'll joke about everyone wanting cask strength, right? And you taste something, or you give me your flagship whiskey, and you're like, okay, and like a lot of times people will taste and be like, yeah, it's good, but imagine this at cask strength, right?
yeah.
And I mean, it'd be cool, like to taste Westward at cask strength, but with both so far, I don't feel like anything is diluted, watered down, like I'm missing out. And maybe that is like one parallel to some of like the nicer scotches that I enjoy drinking, that they can be at that lower ABV, but it feels robust still. It's complex. And obviously, again, there's a little bit more mindfulness in terms of like the barrel entry proof, how it's being finished, and then how you're proofing it down, because nothing about this makes me feel like I'm being cheated of another experience, I guess is the best way to put it.
Absolutely. No, that's cool. I think something else that we do a good amount of is just slow proofing. Something that I learned from cognac makers is, adding a very small amount of water over the years, as the spirit matures, because then it's not a dilution, it's a reduction, right? And you
Mm,
still have that richness, you still have that flavor, that character. And over time, that water has, there's chemical bonds that form, and it's just become part of the whole rather than, okay, we're going to barrel this whiskey tomorrow. Let's dump a bunch of water in it, get it down to the ABV we want.
that's
You've
what I
lost a lot of
imagine.
flavor. Yeah,
Yeah,
you've
I didn't
lost a
even
ton
know
of
that there's a
flavor.
slower process, but then you started talking about that, and I got this like cooking visual of just like the Anjou and like reducing that down where it's like
Yes,
super tasty, and that's nice.
absolutely, man,
I'm
for
getting
sure.
hungry. All right, so
Yes.
pairing for this one, what did you come up with?
I came up with Reanimator.
Oh, and the
Stuart
anniversary
Gordon.
today. I post like, dude,
Oh my
we're
God, it
like we're
is.
I posted in my story like not too long ago because I was like, oh, it's Reanimator's anniversary. And
I
and
saw that this morning and completely forgot. Yeah.
that's so cool. But okay, let,
Yeah.
let me hear you out. Reanimator. I'm here for
Ah,
this.
I mean, Stuart Gordon, R.I.P. Castle Freak is an incredible movie, also,
Yeah.
obviously. Um, I guess it was, if you watching Reanimator, like, I think there's some like high-minded horror concepts in that movie, but it does not take itself seriously at all,
Yeah.
and to me, that's kind of where Pinot is, moving into this category of we're celebrating these world-class epic wines being made right here. But we're not pretentious about it. We're not stuffy about it. It's really just this great marriage of those things. And it's also, I think in that sort of tongue-in-cheek style of Reanimator, it's our, sort of American single malt version of a sherry cask, right? Like why
Yeah.
why are we going to order sherry barrels from halfway around the world that are dried, probably broken down as they're shipped over, maybe even only dumped, some like okay sherry into it for a few hours before they passed it off as a sherry cask.
Yeah.
We're going to use our local stuff. So yeah, that sort of kind of cheeky swipe at that is I think another kind of similarity between the two of those for sure. And yeah, I think there's more oak character in this whiskey, but it's not just knocking you over the head. It isn't distracting you from what's really going on. As you said, you get some of those deeper elements of oak to it. And I remember somebody reading about it one of the like special effects people on, Reanimator said, the most blood I've ever used, like fake blood in a movie, has been like 2 gallons, and we used 24 in this movie, just like so much, right? But it
That's so
doesn't,
cool.
when you finish watching that movie, you're not like, damn, that was a lot of fake blood, right? Like it's
Well, it's funny because you're saying this, and I'm like calling back certain scenes, but I'm like, yeah, if you ask me like super bloody and gory movies, I would never guess Reanimator. And now
yeah.
I'm gonna get off here and go give it a watch. Do my blood
Yeah,
count.
so that's another one of those similarities I think between the two was there's more of that there, but it's not dominating, it's not taking over the story. Um, yeah, it's a real throat grabber. I think that was a
Man,
tagline
Miles,
for
you're
Reanimator.
good at this. You're
I gave it
you
some thought, man. I
yeah.
look.
Well, yeah, I think it's cool because like often people ask me like where do you come up with this stuff? And I feel like if it's there, like it's always there. And I know that's a simple answer, but if you are passionate about something, you will find a connection. It might be a feeling, it might just be like sometimes it's geography, sometimes it's a feeling, sometimes it's a memory. Um, it could be the smallest thing, but like kind of seeing you go through the pairings too, and they're so damn good. I'm like, well, shit. Like this is what like, I guess in many ways why I started this was like that. Everybody is kind of like whiskey morgue, if that like. Funny enough, I never thought I
Yes.
would do this. I always said I'm going to be behind camera. I'm just going to do written pieces. I'm not going to, you know, interview people or show my face online. And it's just nice to see it come together, and you take on the role and do some epic pairings as you've been.
Dude, yes, absolutely. Well, as you say, I mean, if you have a love for things, like yeah, I'm that same way, and I think that if you have a creative mind, which I mean, all of us do,
Yeah.
but you see connections everywhere, right? You see how things weave into each other, how things beget other things that may come full circle and just run into something else in a way that maybe you hadn't seen before. But yeah, everything's connected. And I've also, as you said at the beginning of this, traveling a lot these days. So I've had plenty of time on airplanes and in airports to kind of sit
Yeah.
and think
Think about
about
these
these
pairings.
pairings for sure.
Yeah, my notepad's wild. Like it's the same thing. Whenever I have downtime, I'm just like on my phone. I have like notepads open, and it'll be like the most like weird ideas that come to mind sometimes. And you're like, you don't know where it's going, and it comes together. For this
Yes.
one here, funny enough, I took the same approach as you because when I wrote like whenever I think of wine, I at first I almost want to think of like this like there's a sophistication, like you said, there's like world class wines that are celebrated, almost like gets a little bit fancy and regal. But then like taste. So initially I came into this and I was like, oh, I'm gonna do maybe like a vampire film, but like Dracula. I think of like wine, even though he says he doesn't drink wine. Um, but I'm going Lost Boys on this one.
Nice.
And I think for that same reason that it's like it's sophisticated, it's a complex pour. There's that like fancy or bouginess of the wine being in there, but also like you can drink this eating Chinese takeout. And
Yes.
just like I would take a swig of the bottle of this where it's not pretentious, it's not over pretentious. And I know you're a motorcycle guy, so I'm gonna throw that in there as this caveat. But
Epic.
like yeah, like it could be fancy vampire. But I'm like, this is more like Lost Boys hanging out eating Chinese food. But it can dress up for either occasion.
Amazing. Try my.
Oh, that's cool. Yes.
That's my candle holder. Yeah, and it bleeds when you put a red candle in it right out of
I've
the
seen
mouth.
some of those. I need one. I need
Yeah.
one. And
Yeah.
for those of you like before we jumped on here, I saw Miles jump on camera and I'm like, oh cool, you have like the Jason mask in the background. And he's like, yeah, that's just like my home decor. And like outside I've set up this studio, but the same in my house. I just like it's like classy with like horror artifacts just sprinkled around, and I
Yeah.
love it. You got to celebrate all
I
year
I have
long.
a massive like classic Frankenstein head on the side of my refrigerator. It's like 2 feet tall. Like, I
That's
mean,
awesome.
it's worked into, the rest of the house. It's
Yeah.
not like a college dorm
Yeah,
room or
it's
anything. But
tasteful. Yeah,
like,
that's why I'm like I don't want it to look like Spirit Halloween,
no,
but
totally.
like I don't want it to be too cheesy. But like yeah, there's a ton of cool art pieces and posters that have kind of made their way into my house. Um,
Absolutely.
all right, let's go on to number three here. So we're going in the stout cask, and I'll be honest, this is the one that intrigued me the most. And weirdly enough, I'm not a huge stout person, but I feel like as of late, I've kind of like been dabbling in them. Again, some craft brewers nearby. Indie Ale House, my favorite in Toronto, they do Zombie Apocalypse.
Nice.
And I've revisited Stout, and it maybe because it's a kind of a recent thing. When you sent the bottles over, I was like, okay, I want to see how this plays with the whiskey. So I haven't tasted it yet. But maybe you can give me the rundown and kind of like how this came together, and then we'll taste through it.
Totally. I love that you're doing these on the fly. This is really cool. I dig this. Yeah,
I didn't want to
nothing
make
but
any
her.
cheat sheets. I was like, I just want to go into
Of
this
course.
and my initial reaction and kind of make it as genuine as possible.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, Westward Whiskey Stout Cask. So, as it's been mentioned many times in this conversation, we're ex-brewers,
Mm.
ex-brewers making whiskey, right? So, back in late 2015, a brewery that I used to work for here in Portland called Migration Brewing asked for a barrel. They wanted to age this every holiday season. They make this really epic Belgian chocolate stout. It's
Nice.
incredible beer, and they wanted to barrel age some. So yeah, I sent them like freshly emptied Westward barrel, and just got to thinking like, wow, you know what? I mean, we have such good like toffee, mocha, coffee, chocolate notes in classic Westward in that flagship.
Yeah.
Bet that would just be an incredible flavor match. And so, they were at the time a really small brewery. I figured they wouldn't have room to just kind of keep that barrel kicking around after they'd used it anyway. So I said, why don't you go ahead and send that back? Don't turn it into like a table or something in your
Yeah.
brew pub. Because I'm going to put some mature Westward back in that barrel. And that's how Stout Cask was born was we got the barrel back. We put some, mature Westward into it. I think we did about 10 months that first time, took it out, single barrel, put it into the tasting room, sold out within a couple of weeks, realized we had a winner and away we went with it. Now it's part of the core lineup.
I just saw a post a couple days ago, just scrolling my feed, and it was I don't know which group it was. It was like I think it was Barrel Nation, and they had the malt chocula. Have you seen it?
No.
Okay. So you're doing something right, I guess, once it gets like taterized and they put the stickers on it. But it was like, yeah, it was like the Count Chocula cereal, but it was like malt chocula. And it was that play off
Excellent.
of it. And it's made me excited because again, like I'm like, okay, if we're gonna go down that profile, if you're talking like that like iconic childhood chocolate cereal, then it got the name for a reason. So obviously, like you said, it's done well as a single barrel, but I'm super pumped to taste it as the expression here.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Cheers.
Cheers. Mm. So, and I mean this in the most positive way. Like I expected like overt chocolate or overt stout, but again, that like nice balance of aging. I feel like there's like this like light cocoa powder. I thought and maybe there's a hint of it. I thought I'd get like I don't want to offend anyone like malt teasers or whoppers or but
Yeah. Oh, dude,
there's
big
a
time.
yeah there's a bit of that in there. But
Of course.
I thought it'd be overtly stout again. And I was almost ready for it and kind of like to embrace it, but this a really nice balance of these notes.
You're like, how am I going to lie to Miles right now as I realize that this tastes like stout beer and I hate stout.
No,
No,
no, not
that's
at all.
no. Look, and I mean, same thing with the Pinot, right? Is I'm not trying to flavor Westward with stout beer. Um,
Yeah.
it's thinking about what's already in that core expression, like part of our house flavor in whiskey, and just elevating some of those elements, right? Turning the volume up on some of that, and again, integration, balance. Yeah, that's, yes, obviously, you're going to get a bit more pronounced chocolate, but
Mhm.
not that's, something's going to hit you over the head, right? It's a compliment to
Yeah.
the
Well,
to the
in the
whiskey.
palate, what's similar to the wine, the Pinot finish in this, which I really like is people talk about finish all the time, and the finish is like, oh, how long does the spiciness linger? That's like in terms of like bourbon rye, and you're kind of like, there's that finish. And it's just to me, like don't get me wrong, there's some flavor sitting there if you have a really good finish. But what's cool with this is, like I said, it's like I thought the stout would be more prevalent like mid palate, but it's like this really nice balance. But as I sit here, I'm like sitting at the bar at that like indie ale house where I enjoy those stouts. And it was the same with the wine. It's like for a second, you could almost think that you were enjoying that drink, and it kind of pops up a little bit more on the finish, which I really like. And that's what's lingering as a finish. It's not this overt spice that's carrying what we call the finish, but really nice flavors that are just kind of sitting on the tongue.
I love to hear it. Yeah, and that's a good segue for me into my pairing for this, which is Return of the Living Dead.
Oh man, so good.
Um, love that movie.
Yeah.
And part of it is what you were just saying. Like part of why I found similarities was like I've seen that movie so many times,
Yeah.
and I can quote most of that movie to you. But also,
Yeah.
anytime I put it on, I feel like I kind of notice something new. You know,
Yeah.
just like, oh, that's I didn't catch that before. Like, okay. And
Yeah.
I feel like with stout, when you pour it, that first impression is that's going to change. Like as it sits in the glass, it's going to open up. You're going to, as you nose it and sip it again, you're going to find more depth. You're going to find some more in it as it sits and opens up. And we obviously it's a premium whiskey, and so we don't get the chance to have a lot of people cocktail with it. But stout, I mean, I encourage people to absolutely. I think it's a great
Yeah.
way to enjoy Westward, but stout especially cocktails so well. It just plays wonderfully with so many other flavors. It's really cool.
Well, when you think of like a lot of like I've been trying to dabble a little bit more in cocktails, and I feel like we're kind of heading back towards that. A lot of people who are like maybe just like focused on drinking neat have been dabbling more in cocktails, and you'll hear about someone throwing in like chocolate bitters instead of orange bitters. And I'm like, well, here you go. It's already everything's set up for you
Yeah,
in the glass, right? So it'd be nice to kind of like, and I'll follow up. Maybe I'll post something down the line, but it would be fun to play with these in cocktails.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this is almost an old-fashioned glass already, in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
There's
it's like this condensed
um
down. That's nice.
yeah, and that's something I think I saw the similarities with, Return of the Living Dead was to me that movie is a new take on an old idea, right? Like that's not
Yeah,
just another zombie movie. There's so much else going on, and they kind of skew your expectations. And to me, Stout Cask is rethinking cask finishing in general, right? Like who's been
yeah,
putting whiskey in beer casks? I mean, we've been doing it for a while now, and you're seeing a lot more in the market, which is awesome. But just
yeah.
yeah, again, kind of rethinking it. And to me, the other part that just makes so much sense for these two elements to come together is, I mean, what's the base ingredient in both? Malted barley, right? Like how can you go wrong?
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
it's there in
It's
both. So
throw it in the barrel and let it do its thing. I think like and maybe just slap a toxic label on it. So people don't drink it. I again we're like-minded. So this idea of like returning to something. So like the idea of like the barrel being used and then kind of making its way back. And it's kind of a nod to you, but I was thinking Hollywood chainsaw hookers. And I know you're a big fan. I did my homework, so I will say this. This is like my nod to you. But like kind of like Gunner being taken like so serious as like Leatherface, and to this day, the remakes, everyone's like, can we capture the essence of who he is? And here he is. He's like, also, I'm gonna be a cult leader and do this trashy horror movie, and make a lot of fun out of it. And I'm like, and I had the idea obviously, but like like now talking to you and kind of like it really embodying that kind of feeling, I think is like spot on. This idea of like again like Leatherface being taken so seriously, and I think opposite with you said like Return of the Living Dead, you're like you know what, it seems fun, it's playful, but then it actually is quite layered, and there's a lot of like really great stuff that you can kind of pull from it. And I'm going with Linnea Quigley all day, so
I mean, yeah, bro, nice. The connection has been
yeah,
made.
yeah, there you
Heck,
go.
epic. Yeah, what's funny is I thought about chucking that movie in here somewhere, and I was like, I just can't find it. I don't know how to just justify that. So thank you for doing that. 'Cause
And here's a fun one. The film was all done in less than it takes to do your fermentation process. So it was 5.5 days.
that's how long the shoot took.
Yeah.
I had no idea. That's amazing. Ooh, you can kind of tell.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you're a big fan of those movies, so I had to
Dude,
do you one there on that.
epic. Amazing. Oh, that's great. Yeah, you got any, I mean, I don't know. I'm glad that we're actually finally going to be able to like chat and do this and talk horror. I mean, any other time, let me know. But while I've got you, I mean, do you have any other like who are some of your favorite horror directors that kind of come to mind? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but
Yeah.
honorable
So
mentions for movies, just kind of that sort of thing, Like
so one for me, like okay, I feel like the older I got, I started deep diving into the like subgenres and became, a little bit more snobbier in terms of like, oh, I know this and that. But like the foundation of me while growing up and enjoying horror was that truthfully, it was like, I don't know who was renting these videos, but they weren't returned and they were in like my basement, my cousin's basement, and we all would get together and hang out and we'd throw on these movies. And the scary part is that like the adults knew sometimes that we were watching, these movies. And the one in particular that stood out for, yeah, they're just like, or they would come down and try to scare us because we were in the basement. I'm like 8 years old watching some of these films. So they're not like the greatest deep cuts, but like the one of the first movies that I watched was People Under the Stairs.
Oh
And
yeah.
much more different meaning watching it as an adult from as a child and just kind of being like, oh, there's like people in the house who are stuck and the guy has his Roach has his tongue cut off. And but like, so for me, then I got into the Freddy franchise. That was one of the other videos that were in the basement. I was like, here we have like um A Nightmare on Elm Street, and I enjoy those for what they are. And I think like kind of like reinvented the genre. And what's worse than you going to sleep, you can't go to sleep, and Freddy's in your dreams. And then you have this like social commentary piece of like People Under the Stairs. Um, with like so my whole point is like Wes Craven to me is just one of my favorites. I thought for a while it might be John Carpenter. But like Wes Craven for me is just, and then what's cool is he did all this, and like a lot of horror directors, they might like leave an impression and they put out a couple great movies or they start a franchise and it's never quite captured again. And then dude goes and puts out Scream in the 90s.
Like
And
amazing. Yeah.
yeah, and then again reinvents it. And I love the segue between New Nightmare and Scream because he got real meta in New Nightmare, and then you could tell like he was like obviously toying with these ideas, and then did Scream. So for me, in terms of like just like an amazing portfolio and of just like being so influential in the genre, like yeah, Wes Craven's one of my favorites. That's a long-winded answer.
Amazing. That's great. I mean, yeah, I don't know if you can say enough about Wes Craven, honestly. That's incredible, man. Love that.
How about for yourself? I've learned that I used to ask people like, "What's your favorite horror movie?" And I realize it gets such a difficult question. But because I
Yeah.
pull from my own experiences, was there any that like left a mark on you first? Like maybe it's not even your favorite, but left an impression with you, and maybe uh got you that itch into
Yeah,
getting into horror?
totally. A couple. Yeah, actually, so I don't remember how this even came to be, but I think I was maybe like 4, and my older sister, I think was like 7. Somehow we watched Poltergeist, like without parental supervision.
But isn't
Like,
it crazy that we all have these same stories? That
yeah,
these videos were
right.
around
Like,
and
where were
no
the
one was super.
adults? I do have like a distinct memory of my mother walking in towards the end of it, just like, what are you guys watching? And then probably maybe I was like 7 or 8 at a friend's sleepover, and we watched Creep Show 2,
Oh,
and
nice.
like just leveled me. Just
Yeah.
so freaky. Um, yeah,
So when
that
did
one
when
was
did you get into like the Lloyd Kaufman stuff and getting into, was it like a Toxic Avenger was like the gateway drug to like that stuff? Because I know you're really into that kind of
yeah,
stuff.
oh, big time. It was the first I saw of any of that. I was I think a freshman in high school at a friend's, and we watched Redneck Zombies, which maybe
Nice.
that's why I'm a distiller also now. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
That was the first like trauma
Yeah.
that like
Well, you know what I
crumbled
wanted to
me.
throw in, I'm like, can I throw in like street trash for
Oh
you?
yeah.
And I was like, well, no, like he's making really good stuff. He's not out to take us out here with Westward. So
Can I tell you, it, I would say naively, maybe even stupidly, pitched this idea a couple years ago to our marketing team. I was like, what if, and it can be Portland only, but what if
yeah.
I put together a special blend and it was like Westward Viper? And they were like, what's Viper? And so I had to tell them like what street trash was.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, absolutely not.
Dude, if you I mean, I don't know if this could ever happen, but like never mind allocated bottles. Like those are cool. If I can get the Viper version of Westward, like that would be the most prized bottle that I own for sure.
Dude, amazing. Yeah, no, I think, growing up, My mom, big into movies, and hers was more like psychological thriller, like Hitchcock,
Hmm.
stuff like that. But I mean, we'd watch like the that mystery show on PBS that, and well, Diana Rigg hosted it, but it was Vincent Price before that. And I
Yeah.
think just kind of like started there,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. It's almost, it's funny because like I think a lot of those like broadcasted shows, like, I think of even the impact of unsolved mysteries on me growing up, like the old,
Yes.
like the reenactments just are so damn good. And like, I can joke about how cheesy they were, but it didn't matter when they were like, and then she was sitting there and the bell rang, but no one was. I'm like, shit, you got me. I got goosebumps. Like, I don't care how cheesy the reenactment is, but yeah, I think a lot of those, like, I love the idea of like the host, and that's why like, Joe Bob Briggs kind of having his
Yes.
renaissance. One day I'll get him on here, and like I'm gonna like listen, me, you, and Miles are gonna hang out and drink some Viper. Because I know he is a whiskey guy and we've got some cool stories on that. But like I love the
Okay.
idea of the host because like a lot of us, like that was the case. Like you stayed up, and if like mom and dad allowed you to watch some TV, maybe you caught some of these TV shows, and these hosts kind of walking you through this experience. And I think that that's super cool.
It's classic. It's a classic. Yeah. And so we've got a drive-in here just outside of town that's actually down in wine country, and the kid that runs it is a big time horror guy, and he
Yeah.
just last summer started on like the off nights just showing horror movies. So
Nice.
my girlfriend and I go down there all the time, and I took her down to see Fright Night, and I mean it just does like the OG Fright Night. It does such a good job of
Yeah.
exactly that, like the host of the horror show, coming out of the coffin and hunting down the
Yeah.
demons, and yeah, I mean that, like whole like cable access thing, right? That was
Yes.
from back in the day.
So what I thought is like maybe to kind of like wrap this up, in terms of like something you've watched recently, is there like, and it could be a classic that you revisited, maybe you just mentioned you went to go see Fright Night there. Is there anything that stands out to you in terms of like something you watched in the last couple months that maybe is new, old, something that you revisited that kind of you would throw out there or
Yeah,
recommend?
yeah, man. I mean, if we're talking like kind of contemporary movies, Bone Tomahawk is amazing. I mean, I think it has horror elements. I don't know if I'd call it a horror movie, but
Yeah,
um, Late Night with the Devil, I thought was fantastic. Thought they
love
did an
that. Yeah.
epic job with that. Babadook, I watch Babadook probably twice a year. Like I
Yeah.
yeah, Jennifer Kent killed it with that. Like, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, no, those are good. Late Night with the Devil, again, I feel like the aesthetic of it was so cool and just kind of like it almost feels like yeah, this like one shot on, and again back I guess full circle to television broadcast,
totally.
and kind of just it getting super chaotic, and everything that's going on in his personal life behind the scenes that we're getting and the commercial breaks, and that's really cool. I think for me,
Yeah.
um, and I know it's like super buzzworthy right now, but I finally watched Terrifier 3. And it's funny because like when people ask me, I know it's like kind of divisive or like polarizing. Some people will be like, yeah, like Art the Clown, or some people are like, fuck, like it's so trash. Like I don't really care for it. But I think I'd say this for like in terms of horror. Like my takeaway has been that like we haven't had a name like that's been household acceptable since like a Freddy Krueger. Where it's just like art is horrible. Like the guy's menacing and like the things he
Yeah.
does. And like here are like people dressing up, and like it's become a household name. And I feel like maybe for the genre, it's doing something and kind of speaking to what the audience wants. Like the fact that it's beating out people in the box office right now. Like, I mean, I think the Joker, from what I've heard, I haven't watched it, is kind of low hanging fruit. But like we'll see Smile 2 comes out this weekend and we'll see how it fares. But I think like regardless, it's already like I think what they said is like over quadrupled the budget. And this time they did had a bigger budget in number three.
Amazing.
So for me, it's like whether you're like all about it or not, and I enjoy elements of it and kind of like embracing the over the top gore, and it is ridiculous. A lot of it is very like um street trash and like those type of films where it's kind of just like leaning into how ridiculous it is. But I
I
think
mean,
maybe
yeah.
it's promising for what where horror is going, and maybe some of the cooler things that come out. I love the elevated stuff. I love like you said, like with Babadook and all these movies that are really like kind of thought provoking. There's a whole different art form there. But I'm like, for many of us who grew up on these really trashy slashers and films like that, I'm like, it's cool to see a little bit of a resurgence.
Absolutely, dude. Yes, I totally agree with you. I mean, and yeah, like that's our contemporary, iconic villain, right? As you see, people
Yeah.
are dressing up like it. He's everywhere. It's that's cool to see. Like we haven't had that in a really long time, and I'm so with you. Like I think, being like too sort of self-aware when you're being absurd is kind of obnoxious.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna just be absurd, like, do it, lean into it, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
they're,
Yeah. You got to
they're
own
doing
it.
it. They are doing it. Like that's great. I mean, why not? Like who's overthinking Friday the 13th? Nobody, right? He's
Yeah.
just out there killing people. Like,
Yeah. But I do love like some of these shows where like Joe Bob has gone off and he's like people are writing like academic papers on this and I'm like listen, someone was drinking, doing cocaine and had like and he even said a lot of them were just trying to make money. Even some of the movies we love, they were just trying to make money and they were being absurd and ridiculous and they're like let's capture the audience's attention and here we are
yeah,
like thoroughly picking it apart and in like academia and it was just people having a good time and being wild.
absolutely. Oh man, I love that. It's
Yeah.
funny because yeah. Well, I don't want to go down that hater rabbit hole, but there's
Yeah.
some stuff these days that's like pretty popular in horror that I just can't stand, and
Yeah.
I think it's just either too self-aware or look, a movie can have a message, it can have some symbolism, that's cool, but don't spoon
Yeah.
feed it to me. Don't knock me over the head with it, right?
Yeah.
Just say your thing and let's get it on. Let's go. Um,
Yeah, I think we're just setting up like another episode one day where we've done our tastings. We're just gonna hop on here. We're gonna drink together, and then just we can we can go on our tangents. But I'm right there with you. Like, don't on the opposite side, I joked about like writing academia papers on slashers, but also like don't try to spoon feed me the metaphor and make me feel enlightened by the end of it, and that it's like so deep. So we'll get there. But Miles, before we finish this up, what's coming up? Any projects? I know you're fresh off of Milestone 2 did amazing.
yeah.
I don't think you can get it anymore. Like it came out, it was gone. And then
It
someone's
sold
sitting
out
on
the
it.
day we released it. Yeah.
Anything fun you want to plug? Anything upcoming that you want
Yeah.
to share or where we can find more Westward?
Totally. No, I appreciate that, and thanks for mentioning Milestone because it's our this is our second edition. We're releasing it annually every October. Each year it's gonna just kind of change each edition, but it's all coming from a Solera system. So each previous edition is going to be in the current one. It's
Cool.
kind of this ongoing process, which is really fun. And yeah, it did sell out super fast, which is great. I we'll see where it lands. I hope there's no secondary market bullshit on this one. Like I just
Yeah.
I can't stand that. But whatever. Otherwise, yeah, look, I mean, so if anyone wants to go to westwardwhiskey.com, that's our site. You can see what we're up to. It's also where you can sign up for the club. We run our own whiskey club, which is cool. Like we run it ourselves. It's free to
That's
join. You
cool.
just pay for the whiskey, and once a quarter, I'll release something that I've been working on, some new exclusive something. So yeah, like I said, every couple months we've got some fun new stuff coming down through the club that really is the only way to get that. And that's
That's
super
fun.
fun. We tasted the Stout cast tonight, and for our Q1 release for next year for the club, it's actually going to be a single origin Stout cast, meaning I'm working with barrels all from just one brewery, this brewery on the coast here at Fort George, and I'm putting
Cool.
together like a high ABV blend of Stout cast all from Fort George. So I mean, that's a good way to just see what we're up to and what we got going on. I've been messing around with acacia wood a lot as far as finishing
Nice.
goes with the whiskey and getting some super cool results with that. We'll probably see some of that, coming out next year as well. Yeah, but always tinkering, always messing around.
That's awesome because I feel like you guys have like built such a core foundation. Like even these expressions that you sent over here, like awesome. Like if I can just go and grab these off the shelf, like I know you said the stout maybe is a little bit more limited, but like the flagship, the Pinot, I'm like the fact that these are like your flagship products and kind of like the more regularly available are awesome and that you've built that consistency. But like I also want to see what you're up to in terms of being a mad scientist and still having that fun because I know you're a creative. So the built-in whiskey club, like why go elsewhere? Like you guys are doing it yourself. You're sharing what you're doing behind the scenes and releasing these experimental expressions is super cool.
Exactly, man. I mean, and it's like I said, it's free to join. The shipping is free. And yeah, at this point, they let me do what I want. So,
Nice.
yeah, let's go. Let's go.
All right, Miles, thank you so much for doing this, man, and making it come together. I appreciate you. Got so much more out of this conversation, and it just made me realize again that we need to do this sometime in the near future. So, thank you. And for those of you who are listening, check them out. Go to the website. And what's the typical stuff? Remember to subscribe, review, leave a comment. I don't know what the hell it is anymore. I just throw it across all platforms
All that
here.
podcast stuff. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so whatever the podcast stuff is. All right, Miles. Cheers. Appreciate
Cheers.
it.
Thanks for having me.
Take care.